Okay, 10th grade, this is lesson number 8, the digestive system. So we'll be applying some of our skills we've been learning about homeostasis and all these kind of ideas together. This is the last lesson in our big idea number 2, so at the end of today's lesson, you should have plenty of examples to add here to your answer of the different body systems between different species. And you need to upload a copy of an image or a copy of this to your Schoology so I can look at it and give you feedback on your big idea. Because of course the big ideas are a big part of how we organize your unit test and your assessment. Okay, so here's the tell for today. You have a small part about why we have digestion, a much bigger part here for a digestive system. We're going to have about 3 slides going through the different parts that you need to know and do a drawing of it. Here for enzymes you have a small drawing and you have a table to copy. This is a bigger part, I would say, than this part. You can do some research on ruminants as well here. Okay, so let's look at the purpose of digestion. Why do we have digestion? Well, how does digestion connect to homeostasis? Homeostasis is the first thing we did because it's the kind of the theme of this entire unit. It brings everything together. So what's the connection here? Well, digestion and then absorption of the things that are digested, they're going to come together to help organisms survive and get all the molecules they need. So we need to have all sorts of molecules to survive, and all those molecules have a certain set point, a certain amount we need to have in our bodies to be able to function properly. So the main types of molecules would be proteins, lipids, carbohydrates, minerals, and vitamins as well. And if we're missing if we can't maintain that set point for a particular molecule, then the body will extract it from other parts of the body that aren't as critical to be needing at that point, or maybe it will cause illness depending how long the deficiency goes on. So if you look at this diagram here, here's a nice negative feedback loop. This is for calcium. So in the human body, we have our net set point about 10 milligrams per 100 mils of calcium that we need to have. If it gets too high, then the thyroid gland connecting to our hormone lesson from earlier, here was a hormone called calcitonin, and that calcitonin will then cause calcium to be deposited into your bones. So it's adding calcium to the bones. And the kidneys, when they're filtering out the blood to prepare for urine, it will reduce uptake of the kidneys. So then you're going to have more calcium leaving in your urine than you would if you had low calcium. So you have lots of extra calcium, you take some extra into the bones, and we get rid of extra in urine. And the calcium levels will decline until we get back to set point. If it's not quite at set point, it'll keep going through this loop again until we get back to set point. Now, if we go above set point, below, with too little calcium, then the parathyroid gland is going to release a different hormone called PTH. It's a really long name, but PTH is fine. And it's going to stimulate a few different things. It's going to stimulate the kidneys to uptake calcium, so we're not losing any calcium from our urine. It's going to cause the kidneys to intake more calcium than the kidneys. So the intestines, when they're digesting your food, to absorb as much calcium as possible. And you're also going to take calcium out of your bones. So if you don't have sufficient calcium, your body will take it from the bones and needs it for other things. Then the blood calcium level will rise. If it reaches set point, it'll stop doing this. If it's still too low, it will do this again until it reaches set point. Okay, so we need digestion to maintain homeostasis for a variety of molecules in the body. So the system that we do this, here's the digestive system. Now this is a less complicated diagram than many I've seen. I like this one. It shows exactly what you need to know for this course. So anything in this diagram are things you need to learn and memorize. So take some time and draw that well. I recommend you use color to show things, especially the gallbladder is very small and the pancreas is small over there. It's hard to see them without color to differentiate. Okay, there's 2 main parts or aspects of digestion. You have mechanical digestion and chemical digestion. So those pretty logical names. Take a minute and think about what you think those names might mean. Well, mechanical digestion is physically breaking down the food, making it into smaller pieces, like cutting it up kind of a thing. And chemical is where we use enzymes to help break down the molecules at a chemical level, breaking bonds between different molecules of food. The mouth, we're going to start with the mouth, breaking the whole system now. The mouth is where we're going to start with both mechanical and chemical digestion. The teeth are going to break down the food. Oops. into smaller pieces, of course, which is mechanical digestion. It's going these salivary glands here. They're going to produce saliva, which has a couple functions. One of them is to lubricate the food so you can swallow it down the esophagus without actually hurting yourself. It's also going to, salivary glands also contain enzymes, particularly one called amylase, and that enzyme will start to digest carbohydrates in your food. That's chemical digestion, it's saliva working on the chemical digestion. And then your tongue, working with your teeth, will also help for the mechanical, and it shapes your food into what's called a bolus, a kind of an oval-like, smooth little food packet that's easier to go down your esophagus and move quite easily down that tube. We don't want to choke on anything when it's be too big. I'm sure you've all had the sensation at some point of swallowing too soon or something gets stuck in the back of your throat and you can feel it's painful. So most of the time we chew our food properly, we lubricate it with saliva and we form this bolus. It's kind of this rounded oval shape that makes it easier to swallow down. The bolus will then move down your esophagus through what are muscular contractions called peristalsis, and it's going to enter the stomach. So the stomach's right here, go from the esophagus into the stomach. A lot of the time, I don't know if you guys have ever done this before, but you can actually stand on your head or be upside down and still swallow things because this is not due to gravity. This is due to muscular contractions. Okay, and peristalsis is the name for all the muscular contractions in all the tubes of your digestive system. The biggest ones would be the esophagus and the small intestine, the large intestine as well. Okay, so once it gets into the stomach contains stomach acid, also known as gastric juice, and it's acidic. And that's part of the chemical digestion. The stomach acid contains other enzymes too that help break down the food further, specifically proteins get broken down in the stomach. The stomach will actually churn. I'm sure you've felt this before. You felt your stomach kind of churning and moving. It actually does it. It's muscular and it churns and moves around to help further mechanically break down the food. And it produces this really liquidy mess, a mix-up of food that's partially digested, and that's called chyme. So chyme is the name for this food, that product that comes out of your stomach that's partially digested but definitely not completely digested yet, very much more liquidy than the bolus you initially swallowed. That chyme is then going to enter the small intestine. That's next, right here at the very top of the small intestine. It's called the duodenum if you're particularly interested. You don't need to know that name. And the small intestine in humans is very long, about 6 meters long. And that's because it takes a long time to digest everything completely and then absorb it. And absorption, the big part of that happens in the small intestine. It's going to move through the entire 6 meters of the small intestine by peristalsis. Remember, peristalsis was the muscular contractions of the tubes. So the muscle will contract and move the food through, the small intestine. At the beginning, up here, the very top of the small intestine, you'll notice how the gallbladder and the pancreas are right there. They are both going to be injecting fluids into the small intestine. So the pancreatic juice comes from the pancreas. It's going to be mixed in with the chyme. And the bile, because bile is also produced by the liver, but stored in the gallbladder, that will then be also released into the small intestine. And those together contain a lot of enzymes and properties and different chemicals that help break down the food even further. So the enzymes in there will help break down more molecules because the big part in the small intestine is absorption, and you need to break down those big molecules, the smallest ones possible, before it can be absorbed into the bloodstream across the small intestine. Okay, so as chyme moves through the small intestine, that 6 meters is going to move through by peristalsis. It's going to be absorbed into the bloodstream. And the small intestine, to allow this absorption to happen, the small intestine is covered in what are called capillaries. Remember capillaries from the respiratory system, those very thin blood vessels? And that's where the nutrients are going to enter the bloodstream, is through the capillaries. And then they can be moved through the bloodstream wherever they need in the body. So nutrient absorption is happening in the small intestine through capillaries that are on top of your small intestine. And then by the time the remains of whatever's left of the food has reached the large intestine, which is sometimes also called the colon, it's mostly waste and it's water, but it hasn't been used yet. So the water that's there, it will get reabsorbed back into the bloodstream. but that's based on cells in the body. So how much water you have will determine how much water you can lose if you're healthy from in the large intestine. I'm sure we've all had illnesses. You get a stomach bug where you have a lot of water in your waist, and that's because it's not waiting long enough to reabsorb that water. Whatever's in your body has to get out so quickly that it's not going to wait and reabsorb the water. So you have to drink a lot of fluids if you have diarrhea to help get that water back in, maintain homeostasis. That waste will then sit down here in the rectum until you have enough of it for it to accumulate to actually go to the bathroom and expel your waste. So that's the whole process. The whole is called the alimentary canal, from mouth, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine over here, rectum, and out. Okay, now the enzymes we've been talking about, let's talk about some specific examples now. So the food we eat, when you first eat it, has really big molecules in it. And we'll talk about those bigger molecules later on in this unit. And those molecules are way too big to be absorbed. The small intestine, they can't go in through the capillaries, they're just so too big. And they're too big to be useful. We can't use a really big molecule, like a starch molecule. It's way too long, like in pasta or bread. We can't incorporate it and break it and use it in cells easily. But starch is made up of many little glucoses. So if we have an enzyme like amylase, this pink part here is an enzyme, it can break down that starch that we ate in pasta into those glucose molecules. We can use those glucose molecules to then give ourselves energy, and we use them in cellular respiration. Now, digestion is the process of breaking down those big molecules, like starch, into smaller molecules like glucose. And if you take biology next year, you learn a lot more detail about specific enzymes and how they work. And those enzymes are biological catalysts. Catalysts are things that speed up chemical reactions, and these are natural biological ones, and they speed up biological reactions. So for example, if we look at this table here, amylase breaks down starches into disaccharides. So disaccharides are sugars with two parts, like sucrose, like galactose. They have two parts to them. And it's found in the mouth. And you also have amylase in the small intestine, but it's produced in the pancreas. That breaks down starch even further. Because starch is so big, it takes a long time to break it down between the mouth and the small intestine. In the stomach, you have an enzyme called pepsin that helps break down proteins into larger peptides. So still not small enough to absorb, but smaller than it was when you first ate it. That's from eating some sort of meat, maybe get protein from beans, that kind of thing. In the small intestine, you have another enzyme called trypsin that's going to help break down proteins even further. Notice how pepsin and trypsin both end in an IN. That's a good way to remember they're both for proteins. Lipase is produced in the pancreas but works on fats. The scientific name for fats are lipids, so lipase works on lipids to help break those down. In the small intestine, we have other enzymes like maltase, it's going to break down sugars, sucrase breaks down sucrose, lactase breaks down dairy products like lactose sugars. So if you don't have enough lactase, you might be lactose intolerant. And the peptidase continue to work on proteins, dipeptides that were made here earlier in the upper part of the small intestine, and I'm going to break those even further into much smaller molecules. So you don't need to memorize this, but you need to understand that enzymes are specific. So amylase only works on starch. Trypsin only works on protein. Lipase only works on fats. They're very specific because the shape of the enzyme has to match with the shape of what's called the substrate. The molecule it's going to break down. It has to match shape like puzzle pieces. Oh, what's going on here? Okay, that's better. So each enzyme, if you notice here, they're in different parts of the system. So we have some in the mouth, the stomach, the small intestine produced in the pancreas, and small intestine produced in the small intestine, and they all work on specific molecules. Okay, so the example we just talked about, here we are again. Pepsin in the stomach works on proteins. And then lipase works on fats, but it's produced in the pancreas, and this happens in the small intestine. Okay, most enzyme names in general end the letters ASE, so amylase, twice, lipase, maltase, sucrase, lactase, peptidase. The exceptions here are pepsin and trypsin, but most of them do end in ASE, so it's a good thing to notice. And if you see a chemical in the future that ends in ASE, chances are it's probably an enzyme. So again, copy both of these down to your notes. The table is very useful, and this is a useful diagram to help you understand how enzymes work. Remember, the enzymes have a shape that fits with the chemical the molecule they're going to break down. So this is called a substrate, and this is the active site where it's going to bind and break down that big molecule into smaller molecules. Okay, so that's how it works in humans. Now, a lot of organisms are similar to humans, but some are quite different. So we're going to talk about ruminants in particular because they're really interesting. So in humans, when we eat something, we're not necessarily able to get things out of every single molecule that we eat. So for example, cellulose is a very big molecule found in a lot of plants, but it's really too big for us to digest it. So especially hear people eating celery, that it's costs more calories to chew than you can get from it, and that's because celery is mostly cellulose, and our body cannot digest it. It's just too big. We don't have the right enzymes. We can't do it. But there are a whole bunch of organisms called ruminants, tend to be herbivores, and they can digest it. And so there's a few differences in their digestive system compared to ours because of this fact. So the examples of ruminants, cattle, sheep, goats, buffalo, deer, elk, giraffes, and camels. You can pick one of these to look at, but they all are some very similar things that they use to help them digest cellulose. And your task is to figure out what makes them able to do it. So here's some kind of hints. Here's a sheep's system, quite different from ours at the beginning, the kind of stomach area particularly. And then same thing here, we have a cow, it's quite different in the stomach area. They still have a small intestine, they still have the esophagus and the mouth and the anus, but it's just a little bit different in the stomach kind of an area. So you need to look at that and see what is different in these that allows them to digest cellulose when we can't. You can look at ruminants in general, or you can pick one of these to focus on. It's up to you. And we need to answer the question, what makes them able to digest cellulose when we cannot? Talk about the structure of their system, okay? All right, so your homework is to upload all of the notebook pages from today, your notes. That should include the sentence about the ruminants, your research for that, as well as your big idea. Number 2 should be done as well. So upload that to Schoology. I'll give you some feedback over the weekend, so that way you can be ready. We're getting close to the end of the June. We're a little bit over halfway through. So a couple of weeks left, guys. We're doing our big unit test. As always, if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to email me. Make a note of them for our next Zoom meeting, and we'll go from there. Hope everyone's staying home and staying safe. Take care.